G'day, how you going? God bless you. Today I'd like to do a review of the Revelation 12 sign, looking at all the features that have been found so far. There are 14 features in regards to verses 1 and 2, and 2 additional features in regards to verses 3 and 4. So we'll just read the text so that you're familiar with that. And here's my list here, which only goes up to 14, and I'll show you the last 2 features at the end of the video. Revelation chapter 12 verses 1 to 5. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. So, if we go back to my chart, which is chart number 11, and if you want to share this on Facebook, I have a post here about this chart. So I'll just go back to the PDF. Basically, we've got, as most people would know, as most Christians would know, we have the constellation Virgo, which represents the woman, and above her head is the constellation Leo. And on the 23rd of September, 3 additional stars, planets are known as wandering stars, come into formation, making a crown of 12 stars above her head. Now I'll just quickly deal with the issue of whether there's 9 stars in Leo or not. Essentially, I have this chart here, which is also on my Facebook page, Rapture Pentecost 2021. And in that video, in a post that I did, I discuss how Genesis 49 verse 9 talks about the lying being couched. So couching means lying down. Crouching is represented here, and a lion walking is represented here. So I believe that the lion above the woman's head is couching, not crouching or walking, which is what was later developed in 1952 by Hans Augusto Rey. So if you go to the Facebook post, you can find details about that. Now, the constellation Virgo is the Alpha constellation, or the first constellation in the Mazzaroth. So there's the Mazzaroth, which is the corrupted zodiac form of the constellations, and we have Leo, which is the last constellation, and that's the Omega constellation. So if you go to the zodiac, it doesn't have these as first and last. So just briefly, Genesis 1 verse 14, and God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." So the first reason listed in regards to signs in the heavens, in regards to why God created the sun, the moon and the stars, is for signs. And the Greek word semeion means a token or an indication. So just while I'm on this topic in regards to signs, Jesus says in the last chapter of the book of Revelation, in chapter 22, I think it's verse 16, he says that he is the bright and morning star, which is Venus. And Venus is a rocky planet, whereas Jupiter is a gaseous planet. Jupiter is in the outer part of the solar system. Venus is in the inside part of the solar system. So since the scripture explicitly says that Jesus is the bright and morning star, which is Venus, I believe that Jupiter is a token of Jesus, and therefore Jupiter as the man-child, and therefore Jupiter is a token of the man-child. And there is some people who believe that the church will be caught up on this date, on the 23rd, and I've got a video that details why that is not the case. But an extra element to that video that I did not point out was that that if Jupiter is a token of the man-child and is not the actual man-child, and just, you know, the reasoning is that the man-child is the body of Christ, and it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12 that the church is the body of Christ. So the reasoning is that if the man-child is being caught up, and it uses the Greek word caught up. The English expression caught up is the Greek word harpazo. Because of all that, people believe that the church is going to be caught up. But I don't believe that to be the case, because I believe it is a token of what's going to happen 1,335 days after Yom Teruah 2017, which lands us on 2021, on Pentecost 2021, which is the 18th of May, according to TorahCalendar.com. So I just wanted to get that out there before I go on to these points. So the other thing is Luke 21 verse 11 and verse 25. If you want to look at verse 25, it says, and great earthquakes shall be in diverse places. And we just had an earthquake in Mexico today. I was looking on the Wikipedia, noticing a couple of days ago that we hadn't had an earthquake for a while, and I thought we're due for one, and today we've had one. And famines and pestilences and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. And verse 25 also talks about there being signs in the heaven. So this is Jesus talking on the Mount of Olives, which he will return to on the day of the Lord, on the day of Armageddon, the last day of Daniel's 70th week, on Yom Teruah 2024. Yom Kippur 2024. I've been picked up for saying Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur 2024. Jesus will land his feet on the Mount of Olives. So that was the place where he was bringing this sermon about his disciples come to him and said, what will happen in the last days. So we are living in the last days. There's been 6,000 years since Adam, roughly speaking, and there's going to be the millennial reign, which will form God's great week, 7,000 years. In Peter it says that a day is as 1,000 years unto the Lord, and he's quoting Psalms when he says that, Psalm 90, which Moses wrote. So we know that there's going to be signs in the heavens and where the stars are, where the heavenly bodies move. So how I came into being involved with this, I first watched Rick Larson's documentary, The Star of Bethlehem, and if you Google Rick Larson, The Star of Bethlehem, there's a video on YouTube for that you can watch. The first one that you click on is not a very good quality one, so there's another one here in this is the good quality one. If we go back a step, you can see this one's a poorer quality. But anyway, I watched that video, and at the time I was on Yahoo Answers in this religion and spirituality section, and I was using Louis Vega's charts, and I then came across Scott Clark's video, his first video that he uses in 2011, and so that's when I became aware of the Revelation 12 sign in a future aspect, because the Star of Bethlehem movie documentary deals with it in a past sense. In terms of eschatology, you have futurists who believe that the book of Revelation hasn't yet begun. In Revelation chapter 1, it talks about the things that are and the things that are hereafter. And then we have chapters 2 and 3, which are the things that are. And then chapter 4, it specifically says in verse 1 that the things hereafter have begun. The text tells us that that is occurring. So Revelation 4 verse 4 Revelation chapter 4 verse 1 is basically when Revelation starts, and then when we get to Revelation chapter 6 and Revelation 12, because of the dual chronology of the book of Revelation, chapter 6 and chapter 12, they are the beginning of Daniel's 70th week. So the book of Revelation is so there's futurists and historicists, or preterists. Historicists, they believe that the book of Revelation, that more parts of it have taken place than futurists. Excuse me, I didn't study this before I started the video, so I'm a little bit rusty on the details about that. But essentially, I believe Rick Larson's view is that Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2 occurred at Jesus' birth, and that's why he, in his documentary, is looking into that aspect. But there's many people who believe that Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2, 3 and 4 have yet to have a full complete fulfillment. There's been parts of the Revelation 12 sign, which I'm going to show you, that have been taking place in the last 9 months. So I came across Scott's video, and then I did my own video in beginning of 2013, and so that's when I started to believe that it was to be true. And I communicated with Lewis to find out who actually discovered it. And as far as he was concerned, he had discovered it. He said in an email, he said, "Oh, Scott can have it," because the dates for his folders post-dated Scott's video. And William Tapley is the first person to have a video on YouTube detailing the Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2 sign. So just a bit of history there, or context. So I believe that all three people have independently discovered the sign, which is really quite amazing that God would arrange that. And I believe there could have been other people who perhaps discovered it and didn't actually publish their findings. So it's important that we detail things that we find and discover, and that we let people know about them. So Scott essentially discovered on this date, on the 23rd of September. He's the first to really. We know how many videos Scott has done about this, so it's clear that in his mind that he has discovered it. So essentially, we've got Mercury, Mars, and Venus coming into alignment and making 12 stars directly above the head of Virgo. Now, some people will say that there's a constellation up here somewhere called Bernice, the Hair of Bernices. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation. Forgive me if I haven't pronounced that correctly. and they say that's the crown. But that's always there, so that doesn't really give us a trigger. And it's not directly above a head. A crown, you would expect to be here. And I noticed a video by Narnia, I think it's Narnia 9. She was talking about there being a constellation that has 12,000 stars above a head here. But once again, that's always there. So we're really looking for something that is a trigger point that would indicate that something different is happening. So we've got the 12 stars. That's what Scott went looking for, I believe. Now, he didn't immediately talk about the gestation of the planet in the womb. So I don't know if he heard someone comment about that, and then he decided 2 years later, because it was not until 2013 that aspect was discussed by Scott. So I haven't heard him say that he discovered that aspect. I know he is claiming that he discovered the 12 stars above Virgo's head, but the gestational period of Jupiter within the womb, he might have been grandstanding and holding back about that, but I know with like Jupiter, how it's got the stripes and the red spot, the pierced side of Jesus is represented like he got a spear in his side. That is represented by that red spot, and the stripes. We read here in in Isaiah about how we are healed, and with his stripes we are healed. So there's some other. I'll just divert for a moment. I've got it here. What did I call it? Okay, I'll go to I'm not sure if I've got it there. I'll just quickly go to this. Just bear with me. Yeah, this is it. So, just talking about Jupiter and the stripes and the red spot and being the king planet, I understand that there's 3 things that relate to Jupiter, but the scripture explicitly says that Jesus is the bright and morning star. It doesn't say that he's Jupiter. But I do recognise that there are 3 tokens that Jesus could be Jupiter, being the king planet, the stripes, and the pierced side. So I thought I'd just briefly mention this. You can see on my Facebook page, Rapture Pentecost 2021, details about, it's going to take some time to go into all these scriptures, which I don't really want to do right now. So I don't know. So what I was going to say was, someone made a comment in my on one of my videos about the stripes and the red spot. So how this information comes about can simply be just someone commenting. Someone commenting about the comet that occurred on the 17th of November 2016 on one of my videos, and then I heard some other people talking about it. Sometimes it's not the person who's publishing a video about something that is the person who's necessarily discovered that particular detail. It could be just someone making a comment. So I don't understand why it took from 2011, when Scott first published his video on the Revelation 12 sign, particularly about the 12 stars above the Virgo's head, why it took him 2 years to talk about Jupiter being in the womb. But there's some very interesting details that we can flush out that go in addition to that gestational period. So let's go on with the other points. So we've got, the text is, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven. So the The King James uses the word wonder, but in the Greek the word is semeion, which means sign or indication or token or miracle, which is why I believe the King James translators use the word wonder. A woman clothed with the sun. Okay, so we've got the sun positioned here at this time, which occurs once every year. And some people argue that because the sun isn't directly over this area of the body, that's not good enough for them, that the constellation isn't actually clothed in the sun because of that. But the sun is pretty bright, and when you go into stellarium and take off the atmosphere at this time, it's definitely clothing the woman. She's definitely clothed in the sun, and I believe God is very organized, right? Because when I started doing all this chart, if I had the sun smack bang in the middle here, it would crowd all the things I've got to show. And incredibly, all the things I've got to show have meant that it's been able to be displayed in a very organized way, in a non-cluttered way, non-crowded. Yes, my chart has become crowded now. I've added a lot of features. I'll just divert momentarily. If you go to my Rapture Pentecost 2021 Facebook page, you can navigate to earlier posts by clicking on photos, and then going to the timeline photos album. And because every post that I make, to my recollection anyway, I include a photo, so you can roll down to the bottom very, very quickly rather than going through each post. Is a much slower way. So my first graphic on this was actually this one here, I believe, which a lot of people have used. And I got a Facebook friend, Alistair Lowe, who he was asking for a copy of the chart, and that was, I think it was says here the 13th of December. So I made this post on the 2nd of January. That was 2nd of January 2015. But the first, when Alistair made his inquiry, it was the 13th of December 2014, according to that version timestamp there. So a lot of people have been using this graphic to demonstrate or to get across the message about the Revelation 12 sign. So my first post with using the white background, because I was sharing these charts with friends and making an A4 copy. This is chart 11, so I have chart 12 on the other side. I make a double print and laminate them. So I realized if I'm going to do a full sheet printout of this in black, it's going to use up a lot of my toner. So that's why I went with the white. So I made that post there, and that's not as cluttered as the latest version. And then I think it's up here. Up here is when I introduced the Hanukkah aspect of it, which was last year in March 2016, and that was in response to, and I detail this in my Facebook post, that was in response to Steve Fletcher. He was going on about Hanukkah in one of his posts, and as I say, it's detailed in my Facebook post. But that's when the Hanukkah aspect came into it, because I'll just go to the chart because I can zoom in. The Jupiter hits the line. See the star from here to here, and this star is Spica. That creates a line, and Jupiter hits that line. And I'll just bring up a screenshot from Stellarium. So here's the screenshot from Stellarium. You've got Jupiter hitting the side line there, and this is a close-up again, a little bit closer, and then this is the really close-up version of it, and you can see it's just hitting that line there. So that's, excuse me, that's on the 20th of November 2016, and that occurs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And what's really interesting about that is Jesus said that unless a seed dies, it remains alone. A seed has to die. And Jesus said 3 days and 3 nights he would be in the heart of the earth. So, when a sperm meets with the egg, right? So we've got Jupiter as the egg, and I'll detail later about this comet here that occurred on the 17th of November. When the sperm meets with the egg, it dies. It's no longer a sperm anymore. It's died to itself. It's now become a zygote, which is the Greek word for yoked or joined. So Jesus died at the 9th hour. So the 9th hour is the Hebrew hour. A Hebrew day is from sunrise to sunset, and then that time is divided by 12. So a Hebrew hour can end up being longer or shorter. So it doesn't have to be exactly 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. Because of that issue, that fact that the Hebrew hour isn't always an hour, exactly an hour as in it is today, where the day is divided by 24 equal hours. So once again, that's detailed in my Facebook post. So the seed died at 1456, figuratively speaking, and I think that's significant because Jesus died at the 9th hour, which is 3 p.m. in the afternoon. 9 o'clock he was crucified. 12 o'clock the sun went dark, and then 3 hours later it was 3 o'clock and he died. So the reason I've just diverted like that, so Steve Fletcher, he was going on about Hanukkah, and I looked into Torah calendar, and on that, back in March 2016, and I was hoping that Hanukkah was going to land on the 20th, but it lands on the 26th. So I then started investigating. I think I googled. I can't recall what I googled first, but I ended up at the Wikipedia entry for implantation, and if I click on implantation human embryo, the Wikipedia, it has this graphic here, and if we click on that, implantation occurs on day 8 or day 9. So we've got the ovaries, we've got the fallopian tube, and we have this this part here which is called the fimbria, and I'll read the details at this tab here. In the female reproductive system, the fimbria, which is singular, and fimbriae is plural, is a fringe of tissue around the ostium of the fallopian tube in the direction of the ovary. So if we go back to implantation, so just, oops, daisy, put over to here, that's in order. So we've got the fimbria is this part here, these jagged parts, and that's the fallopian tube, and it's pointed towards the ovary. So there's no actual physical connection between those two parts. And I'll just go back to the fimbria tab. In the direction of the ovary. An ovary is not directly connected to the adjacent fallopian tube. When ovulation is about to occur, the sex hormones activate the fimbriae, causing it to swell with blood and hit the ovary in a gentle and sweeping motion. An oocyte is released from the ovary into the peritoneal cavity, and the cilia of the fimbriae sweep the ovum into the fallopian tube. Of all the fimbriae, one fimbria is long enough to reach the ovary. It is called the fimbria ovarica, or ovarica. Forgive me if I haven't pronounced that right for all the Greek and Hebrew, well, that'd be Latin, and I think, yeah, it's Latin, for all the Italian people out there. So, I recently revisited the information and became aware of that, but with implantation, it says here, in humans, implantation of the fertilized ovum is most likely to occur about 9 days after ovulation, ranging between 6 and 12 days. So it says in the graphic, I'll just remind you, between day 8 and day 9, but it ranges between 6 and 12 days. And, just like human pregnancy is meant to be 40 weeks, that's the standard, but if you Google what's the longest pregnancy, there's two ladies. One lady went over a year with her pregnancy back in 1950, and that broke the record from the previous one, which was I can't remember exactly, but it broke the record by, I don't know, 6 weeks or something like that. So that was like a miracle. So some people dispute the sign because it's 42 weeks, and if you include this other 2 weeks here, it's actually 44 weeks from the menstrual cycle to when Jupiter is birthed. So that's 44 weeks. So that's 4 weeks past a normal pregnancy. But that to me speaks about it in the terms of it being a miracle. It's going beyond what is normal. So anyway, there's a lot of information to detail here. So I'm just giving you a timeline of what took place. So this, in my Facebook page, Rapture Pentecost 2021, this is when I first put this information down, and I responded to Steve Fletcher, and I'll put a screenshot up of my conversation, which actually which is there. There's the conversation there. So he's saying Hanukkah is January 5 to 13, 2016, and he's always going on about some new rapture date that he's got, and that comes and nothing happens, and so a lot of his communication to me has ended up in my spam folder, and I think this is the only time I've actually replied to him. But so I like I said here, thanks Steve for the idea about Hanukkah, and the Lord also prompting me. So what I did was I went to TorahCalendar.com, and I noticed that Hanukkah was on the 26th, and Jupiter hits the boundary, the side of the woman. Jupiter hits the side. I've got the Stellarium screenshot. There's Jupiter there on the 20th of November, hitting the side of the woman. So, that to me is an indication that, like, where are your ovaries? I know that wouldn't be the exact location, but it is a stick figure. It is a representation, just like the ancient Hebrew letters, the pictographs. They were stick figures. They were just simple lines. So, if you were going to just with stick figures, if you've ever played Pictionary, that would be how you would show it. You just show it on the side. You wouldn't actually, if you wanted a more detailed drawing of it, sure, you go to the Wikipedia, and and we've got what an ovary actually looks like. But you've got a lady has two ovaries, one either side of her side. So I think Jupiter hitting the side there is definitely indicative of an egg being released from the ovary into the fallopian tube. And the other thing is, like I read before in the Wikipedia, is that there is no physical connection between the fallopian tube and the fimbria and the ovary. So Jupiter is coming from space, so to speak, before it hits that line. So it's like, you know, that aspect is there as well. So so what happened? I detailed that on the 25th of March 2016, and you know, it's been there on my chart, and I haven't looked into it any further. Then I got a comment from Laura Crocos, or Crocus. I'm not sure how you pronounce your name, Laura, but I found something going on in the stars confirming Revelation 12 regarding the woman crying out. Now, if you click that link, she's taken a video down. So my apologies to anyone who clicks on links in my Facebook page about this. She's taken a video down. Now, I actually downloaded her video, so... and
I thought, well, I wonder, these stars in Virgo, they must be crying out. They must be having some sort of radio frequency irregular or louder or something.
So she's deleted her video. Sorry, where was I? Comments. She's deleted her video, but you know, she I don't know why she's deleted a video, and I apologise, Laura, for showing your video. You know, I haven't asked for permission to do that, but I think what you found was significant, because it's like, in the order of the things, it comes in at number 14. It's the last part of the puzzle. Your discovery came in before the other parts that I've discovered. So I think it's crucial, and I apologise if I've used your video without your permission, but it's definitely significant. So I'll get to that in a minute. How long have I gone for? 40 minutes. I want to keep this as short as possible because it requires a lot of editing if I allow the video to go too long. So we've got Jupiter as an egg, as the ovum, hitting the side of the woman. And because of Laura's... I'll just go to... see, this red dwarf, there's a Wikipedia entry about it. There was a mysterious signal found on the 12th of May 2017, earlier this year. And now they've since said that that it was, no such signals were detected in further follow-up studies by Arecibo, however, nor by the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia and the Allen Telescope Array ATA in Northern California, suggesting the likelihood that the signals detected earlier were radio frequency and interference from an artificial satellite orbiting the Earth. So they've since said, we heard something, but we can't confirm it. But anyway, researchers observing Ross 128, which is a red dwarf that's deep in space, picked up mysterious signals using the Arecibo Observatory. Abel Mendez, an astrobiologist at the University of Puerto Rico at Arecibo, said the star was observed for 10 minutes, during which time the wide-band radio signal was almost periodic and decreased in frequency. On July 16, 2017, the strange signal at a low frequency, never heard before observed from a red dwarf, was reported on Twitter by Mendez to have been confirmed. Okay, so there's a Wikipedia entry about that, and I detail Laura as being the discoverer. So the text says, and she being with child cried. So you might say, well, why isn't this happening on the 23rd? Well, I suppose to give us some warning, and so we can get all the information together. We might hear the signal again on the 23rd, but as I'm going to detail in a moment about the menstrual cycle being at the end of the astro-birth instead of at the start, I believe these extra features or components to the Revelation 12 sign, and they're not being in exact order, is just so that we have time to report on it, so that, like with the menstrual cycle, I don't believe there's any other conceivable way to demonstrate it at the start of the pregnancy. So I'll get onto that in a moment. But nevertheless, I'll just report on this. Rost 128 is a red dwarf which is right near the head of the constellation Virgo. Made this strange signal which could be construed as the woman crying out. Anyway, so we'll go back to the chart. So a man who doesn't want to be known. His YouTube channel is World Breaker, and my understanding is that he didn't even have a YouTube channel, and I'd have to check that. But this is his one and only video, and he heard about this comet, which is called C/2017 E1, which was discovered by Borisov. It's the Fimbria. Now, just while I've got this image up, that is the Fimbria ovarica, which we heard about. Of all the Fimbria, of all the Fimbriae, one Fimbria is long enough to reach the ovary. It is called the Fimbria ovarica. So, this is the fallopian tube. This is the uterus, and this is the fringe. Fimbria is Latin for fringe, and that is around the edge of the end of the fallopian tube, and then the ovary would be over here. So this longer part of the Fimbriae is known as the Fimbria ovarica, and it's the one that is long enough to touch the ovary and in a gentle motion and cause, it swells up, touches the ovary, and that triggers the egg to be released. If we look at it here, they've got these parts here, the jagged parts of the Fimbriae, and then the Fimbria touches this part of the ovary, and that causes an egg to be released. So I was just talking about just giving you a few glimpses of what's to come here. So we've got that. I thought. Anyway, I thought I had a graphic. Doesn't matter. I'm going to get bogged down here. So it says there C/2017 E1 Borisov. That's I can't remember. I think it was March that it was discovered. So World Breaker, about a month later, he must have heard about it. He knew about the Revelation 12 sign, and then he put this video together. So all the details about the conception comet are there. But what I would like to discuss is that the comet hit the cervix of the woman on the 17th of November 2016. Now, sperm are viable for up to 5 days. So then on the 20th, which is 3 days later, and I believe there's a connection there with Jesus being in the earth for 3 days. Although technically he died and then he was in the earth and then he was resurrected. And anyway, I discuss that complication in my Facebook post. If I start going down that rabbit trail, the video is going to go way longer. So the comet inseminates the constellation Virgo on the 17th. Then 3 days later, the seed dies when it meets with the egg, which is Jupiter, which is the ovum. And so the day of the 20th of November, that's when ovulation takes place, and is also the day that conception takes place. And then we have the day of implantation. So that's what Hanukkah represents. If we go to Torah calendar, we've got, I'll just zoom in on that. Oops. This is not a PDF, so I can't. There we go. So Hanukkah occurs on the 26th. So conception and ovulation was on the 20th of November, and then using a biblical timeline, so Genesis 1, chapter 1, we've got 7 days in the week, and Sunday is the first day of the week, as noted up here in Torah calendar. So on the 20th of November, Sunday the 20th of November, that's when ovulation and fertilization or conception takes place. So the egg comes out of the ovary, that's ovulation. Then the sperm, which was inseminated 3 days earlier, it then makes its way to the fallopian tube, and then the egg is there because it's ovulated, and then it fertilizes the egg, which is conception. So then 7 days later, so using a biblical timeline, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is the day of implantation, day 7, 26th of November, which is the last day of the week. So it's interesting that lines up with Creation Week. So what I then, as I'm doing my chart for, I was doing a Facebook post, and I realised it was going to be too long, so I needed to go and detail other things in various other places in Facebook in earlier versions of my chart, which I'll just briefly go to now. I think it's here. Yeah, there's my first response to Laura there, and I go and detail some things here before, just so there's some background information for people to look into. So when I was doing the graphic for this here, which I'll bring up now, I had the email from Steve, and then I thought I'll include the Hanukkah, just for it to be eye-catching. I'll include this graphic of the fallopian tube, and people will go, "Whoa, what's that?" and the Hanukkah lamp. And then when I did that, I suddenly noticed a parallel or a connection between these the way it's drawn here, these bumps here, and the Hanukkah lamp, which has the menorah in the temple has 7 branches, and this has 9. And then I was because I was reading different things, and where'd I go? Where'd I go next? I think I was reading. I read that, and about how that's implantation. So in the fimbria, how the fimbria swells up, and then the fimbriae swells up, and then the fimbria is the one long enough to reach the ovary. And then I went to the wiki entry on Hanukkah, which I think I started off here. I went to the feast of Hanukkah, and then I clicked on the 9-branched menorah, And then I read the ninth holder, called the shamash, helper or servant, is for a candle used to light all other candles and is to be used as an extra light. To be kosher, the shamash, which is the Hebrew word for sun, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right, must be offset on a higher or lower plane than the main 8 candles or oil lamps. So you can see here it's placed up higher, and these are slightly in a different line. They're sort of like curved. So that's nearly an hour. So the Hanukkah lamp that I used in my graphic, it just had those branches all in a straight line, but this one was raised. So when I suddenly saw that graphic there, and then made the connection that the Hanukkah lamp is like a representation of the Fimbria. And when this picture here, you can clearly see that that's a representation. I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the middle branch. 1, 2, 3, 4. So then I started. Where am I? Then I started saying, well, this is the fallopian tube, and this is the uterine wall where implantation occurs. So we've got here the blastocyst implanting itself in the uterine wall. So I'm showing that as a symbolically, or as a sign or a token. So there's that aspect. So I'll just go back to my chart. So we've got insemination, ovulation, conception, implantation, which is Hanukkah. Then we've got Jupiter just comes outside the line of, and I've got in 2013 I discussed this, and I make a point about, if you want to check my videos, you can go back and check this. I make a point about Jupiter coming outside of the line of the quadrangle of the womb, and that is representative of a baby bump, because this is 29 weeks. A baby bump apparently appears between 12 and 16 weeks. So I believe that is not a detraction from the sign, but is something that backs up that it is actually the Revelation 12 sign that we're looking at. So we've got the baby bump occurring there, and if you zoom out to so that Leo and Virgo in Stellarium, if you zoom out so that you can see both Virgo and Leo, Jupiter is only outside the quadrangle by the diameter of Jupiter. So that's according to the way Stellarium shows the graphics. But when I detailed my how rare is the Revelation 12 sign once in 7,000 years, because a lot of people, detractors of the sign, they've come along and tried to find other instances of the sign, and Jupiter will end up way up here in its retrograde motion. It's only in this occurrence that it's so tightly formed, and also has the other features, the Mercury, Mars, and Venus in this alignment. So you can go to that video. I've got a spreadsheet detailing. When I started out, I began with the birth of Christ and did about 70 years to 70 AD, and I realised this is going to take forever. And I've heard recently that Scott, he did a screenshot for every year for 7,000 years, and it took him a year. So when I did it, it took me a week, and so I started off doing every day for 70 years, and I realised it was going to take me too long. So I then realised that Jupiter, its retrograde motion inside the womb only occur. The retrograde motion inside the womb, as I've just described, where it's tightly in the womb, that only occurs every 83 years. So that made my fact-finding mission a lot more simplified and a lot more efficient. But we've now got two witnesses, Scott and myself, able to back up that the configuration, in particular with the 12 stars, only occurs once in 7,000 years, and that the aspect with Jupiter being in the womb occurs only once in 7,000 years. So, because to me, I believe the sign was true when I just heard that there was 12 stars above the head of Virgo in that particular arrangement. That was enough for me to begin my belief. But when I heard that Jupiter was in retrograde motion within the womb, that was like something extra special. And I saw a Facebook post where Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is finding the golden wrapper, and the meme is when you first see the Revelation 12 sign, it's like Charlie finding the gold wrapper in his chocolate bar. But anyway, when I heard that Jupiter was in the womb, I thought that's definitely the sign. So that was the main thing that I looked for in my 7,000 year search. But Scott has actually done 7,000 screenshots, and he can confirm that this configuration does not occur in 7,000 years. And I can confirm that whenever Jupiter was in the womb, which occurs is 100 times in 7,000 years, and I checked either side of that 83 years as well, I can confirm that the rarity of this. This is all human history, 6,000 years back to Adam and 1,000 years into the future. In fact, it was 6,200 years into the past and 1,200 years into the future. So I've gone an hour. A couple more things to go. So we've got the baby bump, which I detailed in a video 4 years ago. And I think I'll go back to my actual list, and we'll just go through the list. So we've got number 1, the woman clothed with the sun. The sun's brilliance clothes her. The moon under her feet occurs at 5:27 p.m. or 17:27 Israel Daylight Time. The alignment is complete when the moon comes under the feet of the constellation. She's got a crown of 12 stars directly above her head. Leo only has 9 stars. Right, as I mentioned earlier, the lion is couching, not crouching, not walking, couching. And then we have Venus, Mercury, and Mars. Although I think it's not Mercury. Venus, Mars, Mercury. I'll just go back to Venus, Mars, Mercury. But the time it took me to look at the thing, I forgot. Venus, Mars, Mercury. The reason, see, Mercury is the closest planet. It would be extra special if it was Mercury, Venus, Mars, and then it would be in order. Although Earth can't be present, of course. But so I've got Venus, Mercury, Mars. Sorry, Venus, Mars, Mercury. Now the way I'm going to make a memory point here is A comes before E. So that's the way I'm going to remember it. So we'll go here. So we've got Venus, Mars, and Mercury, and that forms 12 stars. All right, so she's pregnant. Jupiter's retrograde motion is 42 weeks inside the womb, and so that number is 294, if I remember correctly, and that number is exactly divisible by 7 times 6 times 7. So 6 represents the number of man. Jesus was a man. 7 represents God's perfection. You might say the Father and the Holy Spirit. So I'll continue. So giving birth, Jupiter is between Virgo's legs on the 23rd. So some might say, why isn't giving birth when Jupiter crosses the cervix of the constellation? Well, when a baby is birthed, it has to come out of that area. So that's why I believe the sign, if we just go back to that, I believe that's why the sign shows Jupiter clearly outside of the womb, because that, when a baby is birthed, that is the case. It is outside of the womb. So then we've got menstruation, and this is shown at the end of the Astro-Pregnancy, 2 to 7 days. So I'll just go back to the chart. So from the day that Jupiter touches that line, which is the day of ovulation on the 20th of November, until the 23rd of September is 44 weeks. So we have 42 weeks where Jupiter is in the womb, and 2 weeks where from the time that Jupiter leaves that line until this point here, when on the 23rd, when Jupiter is birthed, the man-child is birthed. So there's 2 weeks between there, and typically with a pregnancy, the count begins at from the woman's last period. So menstruation lasts 2 weeks. So a woman can't ovulate until about 2 weeks into her cycle. So as I said earlier, to be able to show all this information, I can't conceive of a way how that could have been shown at the beginning. So in the video where I talk about the baby bump 4 years ago, I also mention about the menstruation part there. So as I mentioned earlier about Ross 128 and crying out, whether we'll hear that again on the 23rd, I don't know, and I don't think that's necessary, because we now have 2 things which are not completely in order, and I believe it was for the purposes of communication, because I probably wouldn't be doing this video if it wasn't for Laura making the comment that she did on this. So in terms of reporting for the sign before it actually happens, because that Jesus said, "I tell you this beforehand." In the Gospels, when he's talking to his disciples, he says, "I tell you this beforehand," and that facilitates our belief when it actually takes place. So I believe that is referring to menstruation. So we go back to the list. So we've got menstruation, ejaculation. Now, this is an aspect I just came across last Saturday. I was talking about all this information with in a Bible study with my wife and my son, and I'd already read that a comet's tail becomes active from in the Wikipedia, which is, I've got it here. So there's the Wikipedia entry on the solar system, and the solar system can be broken into the inner solar system and the outer solar system, and the Asteroid-Belt is included in the inner solar system. So I was researching about asteroid belts and all that. Excuse me. And I clicked on this, and that's the asteroid belt there. I don't know how they plotted all those asteroids. I haven't researched it that far, but I assume they would have some method for detailing that asteroid belt and all that. So I was reading. A comet's tail becomes active from solar wind and radiation once inside the inner solar system. So normally a comet doesn't have a tail. And I was also reading a sperm's tail increases motility once inside the fallopian tube, which parallels the inner solar system. So when I was discussing that parallel with my wife and my son, and I brought up this image, and I just suddenly thought about, because earlier I thought about the conception comet when I was watching World Breaker's video. I was thinking, it's just one sperm basically, and I thought, there has to be more to that. Where is the extra part to that? So when I brought up this image, as I was discussing this aspect here about the comet's tail, I suddenly thought about that being sperm in respect to the information I was already, was prevalent in my mind about the comet, and so I there's a free online graphics program called GIMP, and I overlaid this image over the Sky Live, which is what Worldbreaker uses to show his information. Now, just while I'm on that, here's a screenshot. I've zoomed right in on the comet. This is the in Stellarium, 17th of November 2016, and it's 10 o'clock. You can see with those red crosshair, that's where the comet is. So where was I? Here. So I overlaid that image, and actually what I was doing was, before I overlaid that image later that day, I think it might have been the next day, I was showing my wife and my son from the Mars's orbit to Jupiter's orbit. If you go to the halfway point, that's when the asteroid-belt begins, and then from that point to Mars's orbit, that's where the middle point would be of the asteroid-belt. So without actually overlaying it, you don't know exactly where it is. So I did the same thing on this the Sky Live 3D solar system simulator. You've got Mars's orbit there, Jupiter's orbit there, and I went to the halfway point, and then I went to the halfway point again, and I thought, oh, that's the comet is right in the middle of the asteroid-belt, and so that backs up that this is the conception comet, and that insemination is occurring on the 17th of November, because this is amazing, really. This is the day of ejaculation. Now I want to be clinical in my approach to this. I don't want to make it sound dirty, but I also in this graphic show how, from Earth's point of view, if you put a line straight through the comet, that's where it would be projected to on the constellation Virgo, and from Earth through Jupiter, that's where Jupiter is at that time, which is 3 days before the 20th. So I'll go back to my list. So I want to keep this short. And once again, that graphic, I've got a Facebook post about that. So we've got ejaculation, we've got insemination on the 17th. We've got the Fimbria ovarica swooping the ovary. Ovulation, conception, which I've already detailed. Point 10, ovulation, Jupiter, the ovum hitting Virgo's side. Conception, Comet and Jupiter 3 days after point 8. Implantation, Hanukkah occurs 7 days after point 10. Gestation, Jupiter's retrograde motion for 294 days, I believe it is. Let's just confirm that. So I've got 294 divided by 7 equals, that divided by 7 again equals 6. So we've got that. Baby bump, Jupiter goes outside the womb momentarily at 29 weeks. So it's outside the womb, I think, for about a month. Then it goes back inside. On the 14th, point number 14, we've got labour pains cried out, which is the Red-Dwarf Ross 128 radio signal, which, as I pointed out earlier, that's out of order technically, as was the menstruation point, but I believe in terms of discovering all this and reporting on it in a sufficient time. So it could happen again on the 23rd, a mysterious signal, but the point is that it has been covered. The woman did cry out, and Laura makes a point of that in her video, and if I think she should re-upload it, to be honest. Anyway, 7 is the number of completion and perfection. So we've got 14 points here. 14 emphasises this aspect of completion by a factor of 2, and there's a website you can go to check the meaning of those two numbers, number 7 and number 14. So I'm nearly finished. This is amazing to say the least. If every aspect of the astro birth in the Revelation 12 sign has a has an astronomical component that does not just involve the constellations. Because I've had a little bit of a debate with someone on in my comments section, and he's saying that if Revelation 12 verses 1 and 2 is about constellations Virgo and Leo, then verses 3 and 4 has to be about a constellation, which there isn't, not in the vicinity anyway. And so I'll explain that it doesn't just involve the constellations. That does not just involve the constellations, but also planets, which are wandering stars, asteroids, the Red-Dwarf star, which is like another, which is Ross 128. A comet, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Then it is not difficult to see that the dragon, which is what is seen here, and I'll bring up the image of that, using infrared viewing, which you can get in Sky View. In Google Sky, for some reason, it's been blocked out, which Luis Vega charted, and that's been of great interest to people. So here is, I then overlaid that image, which I've never seen anyone do as of yet, and this is the relate. You can see, if I zoom in, the graphics are playing up. So this is Jupiter, and this is the image overlaid. That's how close it is. So if we go to the text, it says, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. So the stars fall first. So the moon moves under the feet of the constellation Virgo. The alignment is complete, and that means the Jupiter is birthed. So before that, the stars fall, because it says, and the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So the dragon is there waiting for it to be born. And it's not until the moon moves under the feet of the constellation, which happens at 5:27 p.m. Israel Daylight Time. That is when the alignment is complete. That is when Jupiter is birthed. So the stars must fall before the moon moves under the feet of the constellation, because it says, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven. So if I go back to my list, which is what is seen here, and is not a constellation but a group of stars in deep space, and is highlighted by the use of an infrared filter, is in fact a token of the dragon seen in verse 3, which I just read. And there's this is an excerpt from my Facebook post. This then leads us to believe that verse 4 will also be fulfilled by an astronomical event. Revelation 12 verse 4, stars of heaven did cast them to the earth. Only meteorites that have the appearance of stars can also fall to the earth. So meteors, they burn up in the atmosphere, and meteorites, they actually make it to earth. So I believe that in Jerusalem we'll most likely see, somewhere in that vicinity we'll see stars falling, which will be represented by meteorites. So these two additional features, which are separate to the Astro-Pregnancy, bring, Lord willing, because the 16th one hasn't occurred yet, the total to 16 astronomical components. And there's a reference here to the number 8 and number 16. The number 8 represents a new beginning. The dramatra for Jesus in Greek, which is Isus, those letters when exchanged for numbers is 888. Jesus was resurrected, and I've got another video, and I get a lot of people commenting on this. I've got another video where I discuss this about Sunday being the 8th day of the week. And there's a Wikipedia entry about it, and there's a book called The Seal of God. I haven't made this up, because if you begin the month, you have 7 days All right, so starting with Sunday, which according to the world standard, there was I know there's a Wikipedia entry. I'll just go to that now, just very quickly. Sunday is the first day of the week in Christianity, but the ISO standard now has Sunday it has the last day of the week. But anyway, in this other video, I talk about Sunday being the 8th day of the week, because if you have a month, and if Sunday, which is the first day of the week, and then you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that's the 7th day of the week. So in the month, the 8th day is Sunday. If you begin, you count. If Sunday happened to fall on the first of the month. So I get a few people asking about that, and I don't want to waste time looking for the Wikipedia entry, but there is a Wikipedia entry which I'll leave a link to in the description box below that talks about Sunday being the 8th day of the week. Jesus was resurrected on the 8th day of the week, so to speak, in an octave. And once again, in my previous video called How to Calculate the Number of the Beast and the Odds, I discuss how the number 8 is significant. Noah, there was 8 people on the ark, and the global flood happened, and then things started over again. So that in that sense, 8 is the number of new beginnings, the number of resurrection. On the 8th day, a child is circumcised in Hebrew tradition. So that's a new beginning. So that's the significance of number 8. I'll go back to my list, so you can check that out there. So hour and 20 minutes. An hour and 20 minutes. That's all I've got to say. I think I covered everything. I just wanted to point out that the blood moon tetrad prophecy has been officially fulfilled. I've got a video about that. And just quickly, from Pentecost 1948 to the first blood moon in 1949 is 333 days. From the last blood moon to the 24th of July, when Israel announced that they will be setting up smart security cameras and having extra police on the Temple Mount. There's an official document released by the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs about that occurred on the 24th. 666 days from the last blood moon to the 24th of July, and then if we go from Pentecost 1948, which is the first full biblical day after the mandate for Palestine ended, if we go from that day to the 24th of July 2017, there is exactly 25,272 days, which has the factors 3 times 3 times 13 times 6 times 6 times 6. So that's pretty unusual. I've got a video detailing that. So we've got chart 11, which has all the information on it. We've got, we've looked at that, and we've looked at that. This is, so yeah, I've detailed that. We've got the Fimbria. So once again, I think that looks like the Hanukkah lamp, and that's the Shemesh, the longer stem in the lamp, represented by as a token of. We've got Jupiter touching that line there. We've got 9 stars in Leo based on the scripture. The lion couching. You can check the Hebrew rabbats out, which says stretch oneself out. Pentecost, this graphic. From Pentecost 1948 to when I believe the rapture is going to take place is 26,666 days. And it's on that day, I believe, that the harlot will be riding the beast. So I'll just zoom in on this. From Yom Teruah 2017 until Pentecost 1948, which is Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks. So what did I say? From Yom Teruah 2017 until Pentecost 2021 is 1,335 days, which is Daniel 12 verse 12. And we've got that, and we've got that. So this is a graphic, as I've already discussed, and we've got the dragon represented, and Ross 128. So yeah, I've covered all the things I wanted to cover. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you. I pray that God blesses you in all the things that you do. Thank you.